I mean, honestly, sometimes I don't want to be that guy, but you can go through this episode of AEW Dynamite, which was fire, and the big takeaway is, oh, Jim Ross called it WWE Dynamite. What do you want me to do? You want me to find JR and chop his head off and then come in here and go, ha ha, I got him, Jim Ross isn't around anymore? It doesn't matter, we all make mistakes. Also, Jim Ross worked for Wild Wrestling Entertainment for 764 years. It's just gonna be embedded in his brain forever. So no, all those people asking me, I do appreciate you getting in touch. I don't care, I don't give a hoot, and I never will. What I do give a hoot about is that you have tuned in. Thank you very much for joining me. Sorry about that rant. I'm a bit crazy, but my name is also Simon Miller. It is WhatCulture Wrestling, and it's Ups and Downs, the show where we get the good bits up and the bad bits are down. And yes, we are about to do it for AEW Dynamite, which is basically the last one of the pandemic era. And how crazy is that? We all made it through, we did it. Let's up those downs. This week, Dynamite started with Chris Jericho coming to the commentary booth because he indeed was going to be a color commentator for the evening, and he should probably do that full time when he decides to hang up his boots. It also tied into the fact that his new book had just come out, so he's a smart tamale and he's a smart man. As is AEW, because the first match was Penta and Eddie Kingston taking on the Young Bucks, and I am thinking about starting a first match on Dynamite counter to see how many good matches they can have in a row. Because I can't remember the last time they had a bad one. They're always pulling brilliance out of their ass. We also had the stipulation that if Eddie and Penta did win, they would get a future tag team shot. And then Matt and Nick Jackson arrived, and they have grown some of the most ridiculous facial hair you have ever seen in your life. And I could feel my tum-tum, my stomach smile. That's how pleased it made me. These two are utter goofs, and they are superb in the ring. I would have given it an up right there, but for everything else too, it's getting it up. We then did get the bell ding ding, and Eddie Kingston right away was going for the most devastating move in all of sports entertainment, the surprise roll-up, because he understands wrestling. And then when Penta got in there, I'm pretty sure that he drop-kicked Matt Jackson right in the ass. This is basically all I need from my wrestling. The Masked Man was then going crazy on the outside as he hit a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker and a crossbody, and then back in the ring, Eddie Kingston was throwing fists. This was a really good idea because they started to come across like a real good team. A quick cold spray from Brandon Cutler allowed the Young Bucks to turn the tides, and then they were beating up Eddie Kingston, but also ensuring they were beating up Penta, who was on the apron, because they didn't want them to make a tag. And they did this with the porn star mustaches. This is the best thing ever. This is also my dream because they're now looking like idiots but being awesome at what they do, and again, that's what I strive for. And of course, eventually Penta got the hot tag, he ran wild, and he finished it all off with this code red for a crazy near 2 count. I actually thought that was going to be the finish, and one day we will live in a wrestling world where a flipping pile driver is the finish. But that's just some way in the future. You know the deal from here as well. It was just tag, go, move, tag, go, move, tag, go, move. The TOM system, or TOM, is always going to do well for you if you are a fighter in All Elite Wrestling. And I pretty much assumed this was going to end in casting distraction because that's what the Young Bucks have been doing for ages. But we actually came up with a justification for this, because if you are going to get your boys and girls to run down there and just beat people up behind the referee's back, eventually they need to get their comeuppance. And it happened on this night. Because the Good Brothers did run down in order to do this, and as soon as the referee was like, I don't know what's going on, Brandon went to use the cold spray again, but he missed, and he hit Matt Jackson right in the face. This then allowed Frankie Kazarian to come down and balance the books, and then back in the squared circle, Penta hit a bunch of moves and a spinning back fist, and he pinned the tag team champions in order for these two to become the #1 contenders. There was then some love between all 3 baby faces, so I'm sure we'll do something with them at some point, but again, the big takeaway is that next week we're getting Young Bucks versus Eddie and Penta, which means they are a real team, so I'm gonna call them P. Which doesn't work, because when you break it down, it would be Penta, Eddie, and we'll just call them Penta and Eddie. But honestly, this was really damn good. Had a nice skit with Christian Cage and Jungle Boy as well, because Christian is just going out of his way to be like, oh, Jungle Boy, you are a star for the future and everybody should love you. And it's working. He's so good in the ring as well, I am starting to fall in love with him. The rest of Jurassic Express then turned up and all like, hey, any friend of Jungle Boy is a friend of ours. And then Christian was all like, oh, Luchasaurus, I've got an uncle that's a dinosaur. And Luchasaurus was really excited. But boy, howdy, do I love the idea of these 4 or doing something down the line. So all that was very pleasant, which cannot be said when it came to Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky. Because they came down to the ring for an interview with Tony Schiavone, and Ethan Page said, "Do not forget, my plan with Darby Allin is to eviscerate him." So I went in the dictionary and I looked up the definition, and it means to disembowel a person or an animal. So these dudes flipping nuts. AEW then also used the past to shape the future, which is always a good idea, although fair play to management as well, because they have moved the coffin match from next week, I suppose, to the week after, because there was a tragedy in where they were going to run the show from. So bravo all round. Anyway though, Sting came out dragging a casket behind him when you saw Darby Allin on the big screen doing some crazy video where he was setting fire to stuff, went out of the coffin that the Stinger had brought to the ring. It was of course Darby Allin. And how many times have we seen The Undertaker do that? But it always works. Sting also hit the Scorpion Death Drop as Darby Allin was just going around gouging everybody's eyes, and Ethan was so mad he was like, "Look, we're not going to do all this in 7 days. I want it in the contract that there's at least a 7-day rest period where you do not attack me." And all this was fine, all this was good, all this will make sense. I'm very intrigued to see how AEW is going to do a coffin casket match. So I think I've only ever seen one in WWE, but that's why it's intriguing. It was then time for more AEW match randomness, although this time we got a little bit of context, because we were about to see Jungle Boy versus Jack Evans, because Matt Hardy is so mad at Jungle Boy for ruining his plans, he is sending one of his cronies to beat him up. I mean, he doesn't even care if Jack wins this, he just wants to bring hurt and sadness to the boy from the jungle. And also, if you didn't hear what I just said, it was Jungle Boy versus Jack Evans. These are just two very talented wrestlers. AEW also made sure this had a certain pizzazz to it, because everyone was like, "Oh man, if Jungle Boy wins, not only is he going to get to 50 victories in the company, but he'll be the first guy to do it." And it's all these little bits that when you do push them together, allow you to stand out of yourself and become a megastar. And of course he accomplished that too. Like, I really like Jack Evans, and I think he'll do something eventually, but it's not his time. So eventually Jungle Boy locked him in the snare trap, Jack had to tap out. All of this was hunky-dory. We also progressed everything else too, because Matt Hardy was out there like lightning because he couldn't believe that his business empire was crumbling. But then here was Christian Cage, here was the Jurassic Express, so they're now working together. And Christian, he really whipped Hardy's ass. I think he also kind of choked him out using some clothing, so he's a little bit strange too. It also meant we got our comeuppance, and I also have a feeling that AEW is doing Christian Cage versus Matt Hardy because they want to reel in some lap fans from the Attitude Era. And when I sit down and ponder it, I actually think that's a pretty good idea. And a quick announcement after that on August 4th, AEW will be coming back to Daily's Place, but after that they won't be back for a good old while. And when you remember that and tie it into the video that AEW showed to end the thing, well, we'll talk about it when we get there. But I may have had something in my eye. MJF jumped in with a promo too and said that if Chris Jericho does want to fight him, he's going to have to agree to some stipulations. So I wonder what that's going to be. But he said before that he's going to take on Sammy Guevara in the main event and try and kill him. He didn't do that, but I do think that was his intent. We went interview crazy here as well, as we also had Andrade saying that he wants to take on Matt Sydal, so he is going to take on Matt Sydal, before we cut back to the ring, and Tony Schiavone was interviewing our AEW World Champion, Kenneth Omega. I was then having a great time straight away, because out came Ken, and he too has grown ridiculous facial hair. Now, I never knew that I wanted this from my pro wrestling, but I need it every single week. If you're a bad guy and you're watching this and you want to grow some dumb fluff on your face, know that I, the bald a-hole, massively support it. Our champion also had some news for us, because he's decided to take a break from AEW, because he's beaten everyone. Doesn't matter if you were a top star, doesn't matter if you were an athletic star, doesn't matter if you were an up-and-coming star. Nobody's been able to beat Omega, so bye-bye, he going home. All of a sudden though, he got interrupted by the Dark Order with Evil Uno on microphone duties, and put your hands up if you didn't see that coming. Then put it down when your brain finally caught up the story and you remembered, oh my gosh, they're here representing Hangman Adam Page. And you got just a little bit excited. What I loved most about all of this is that they were talking about the rankings. Kenny was like, "You can't challenge me, Mr. Evil Uno, because you haven't won enough singles matches." And Evil Uno was like, "Well, that is correct. I know how the system works, but I tell you who has, a certain cowboy who likes to ride his horse." Kenny kind of laughed this off because, of course, every time Adam Page has even thought about this, he's had a massive freak out. So he told Evil Uno, well, if that is the case, why doesn't he come to talk to me himself? So as such, I'm still going home. I don't give a shit. What made this even better is that Hangman Adam Page didn't make his presence known right here. He was going to do that later, and I am so excited to see how we do build to this match, especially because I think, as I've said time and time again, we should do it and Kenny Omega should win, because any good story always has a massive amount of tragedy, and flub me, would that be tragic? Kenny also made a quip here when he looked at the entire Dark Order and saw 5 and went, what, you're going to throw that guy at me? He wouldn't even last 2 minutes. And if you know, you know, and if you don't know, do not worry about it. This was great. Brian Pillman Jr. was then in the back, and he did his best job in order to let us know that he's going to beat Miro. Miro is a bully, and he may think he is the best man ever, but he is going to fall to Brian Pillman Jr. Now, sadly, he was massively incorrect, but this match did the job. It was also for the TNT title, and I always enjoy a championship being showcased on TV. And while Pillman did fight valiantly, my word, did he come up against a warrior whose new shtick is to just crush fools and then eat their bones. I mean, he just threw Brian around for ages, and while Pillman did have these small flurries, it barely affected the man as he continues his transition into a giant wall. He's just too big, he's too strong, and he's too great, and after Brian tried to throw one last kick, Miro just caught it, booted him in the jaw, applied the game over submission, and the clue is in the name. Brian Pillman Jr. passed out. So Miro has so much momentum now, we can start fantasy booking, well, who's going to be the guy to take him down, because they're going to have the world at their feet if they do, which is why deep down in my brain and my loins, I kind of think it would be Jungle Boy. Can you imagine that reaction? I do have to make one point in the sense that Miro now has new music, and while I'm sure it will grow on me, I actually really liked his old one, you know, you're the best, but hey ho, I'm sure he knows what he's doing, but everybody else was talking about it, so I wanted to talk about it too. What a contrast we had from there as well, because Hangman did go and find the Dark Order. He was like, what are you doing, you absolute buffoons? You don't think I could have done out there if I wanted to and talk to Kenny Omega? And they were like, dude, calm down. We know you're not scared of him, but you are scared of failure, and that's why we're here for you, and that's why we believe in you, and we know you can do it. My word, my emotions were just all over the place. What a tremendous group this is. Which is another reason why it should all go bad, because can you imagine the devastation? But honestly, round of applause for AEW. They are building all of this so damn well. Team Taz had an announcement next as well, and I'll just give you the short version. Taz was like, here's what we're going to do in a few weeks. We're going to do Ricky Starks versus Brian Cage for the FTW title. You can get all this bad blood out your system, and then we, as the color orange, can move on to something else. And if you do like Team Taz, I would just say, make sure you enjoy this, because I think when that match does happen, it's going to be bye-bye to Mr. Brian Cage. Okay, next up was Britt Baker and Rebel teaming up to take on Nyla Rose and Vicki Guerrero. And I've made it very clear that this wasn't really something I wanted to see, but I'm always willing to give someone the benefit of the doubt, and also fair play to all 4 of them, they tried super duper hard. Unfortunately though, when I sat down and let my feelings be known, this really just wasn't for me. Down. They didn't have much luck because Rebel dislocated her knee or something here, so I really do hope that she's okay. And when it comes to Vicki Guerrero, I mean, look, I just kind of felt the whole excuse me thing is overplayed, and she is not a wrestler. This means we shouldn't judge her like she is a wrestler, but it also means we're allowed to go, well, if she's not a wrestler, why is she getting in the ring to begin with? It does mean that when she is happy to tag in, you are a little bit like, why would she have so much confidence? Although we did get the finish right in the sense that Britt Baker made her tap out to Longjaw, meaning our champion and her friend did win the match. But Vicki Guerrero was up on her feet around about 33 seconds after this, so once again you were just like, huh. Nyla also powerbombed Britt through a table to end all of this, and we are going to get that match in a couple of weeks. But I just think there were other ways and means you could have done this, like Britt Baker versus Vicki Guerrero, but doesn't go anywhere because Nyla Rose just runs out and murders everybody. I always appreciate the fact we tried to be creative, but like I say, this one, swing and a miss. Quick promo with the Inner Circle followed, and the basic takeaway is that Santana and Ortiz are gunning for FTR, and when they do, they should absolutely rip them limb for limb. Then they should go after whoever the tag team champions are, and they should become the tag team champions, because these guys are just killing it right now. It's their time. The main event was then ready to roll, and it's one of these matches that makes me so happy because it is 2 homegrown AEW stars proving that they are absolutely tremendous at what they do. I mean, this was flubbing brilliant. up. It's so easy to forget that MJF can wrestle his ass off too because we're always talking about his skills on a microphone, and I swear Sammy Guevara just gets better and better every single week. When he does get into full flow too, he is gonna be a superb babyface. Maxwell bailed instantly because he is a massive dick, but when they were back in there, they started to chain wrestle, which I imagine is a wink and a nod to all these people that go, AEW is just spot fest after spot fest. Sure it is, but we enjoy that, but when it comes down to like the technical side, these guys have it too. As soon as MJF did realize that things weren't going as well though, he poked Sammy Guevara right in his eye, which ties into what I just said. He's a massive asshat. They then just went reversal crazy as Maxwell was able to hit a powerbomb when he caught Sammy Guevara off a springboard, but then Sammy Guevara was hitting Maxwell Jacob Freeman with a Spanish fly, and look, eventually that move is going to have to start winning matches, but in terms of my enjoyment and visual wowness, it was up to 10. We then saw this crazy dive as MJF was on the other side of the barricade and Sammy Guevara just hurled himself at the man, and that must have hurt like hell, and then I could not believe it. MJF gave Sammy a tombstone from the second rope. A tombstone from the second rope. And when Sammy got his shoulder up at 2, I was like, oh man, we in for it now. I mean, you really do need to go and watch this because it's amazing. And after a most devastating move in all of sports entertainment battle, Sammy actually was able to hit the GTH, but MJF got his foot on the ropes at 2, and I swear I was having kittens. I have no idea what that saying means, but it just seemed appropriate. Guevara then followed it up with a 630 from the top, which he'd been teasing the entire match, and I was convinced that was it, it was done. And then MJF got his shoulder up again at 2, and that was it. I just laid down and think, man, I gotta die. I really didn't know which way we were going to go with it either, because there were pros and cons for both winning and both losing, and I should have known that what we were gonna do is cast distraction and use our MP, because if you do that, your Pokemon will always be victorious. Because it was here where Sean Spears started to make his way to the ring, and because Chris Jericho was on commentary, he went to stop him. But then Wardlow was out as well, and he grabbed Chris, dragged him onto the stage, and threw him to the floor. That poor man's getting thrown to the floor all the time. And Sammy Guevara was so upset about all of this, he just stared off into the distance, all forlorn. It's kind of like he forgot he was wrestling, so Sean Spears got a chair, whammed him right in the head, down Sean went. The referee didn't see any of this, so out of his own pain, Maxwell slowly climbed across the ring. He draped an arm over the top. 1, 2, 3. That damn MJF had won. Now this is a tough one because yes, we're all getting bored of this finish because we see it in every single company all the time, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be allowed to do it, especially when you have a situation like this. I mean, I would describe it as Wrestling 101. And look, it was the only one we saw on this episode of Dynamite, and it did get a massive reaction. And just for the crazies that come at me on Twitter, I gave W 4 years of doing it when I was reviewing them before I started bringing them up. So we gotta have balance across the board. Also, this match was so good, I don't even care. This is the kind of wrestling I need in my veins, and honestly, if you've got nothing else to do today and you haven't seen it, change that right now. Surprisingly, this wasn't the end of Dynamite because as already said, AEW is back on the road next week, so they played this video vignette thanking Jacksonville and thanking Daily's Place for everything that they have done throughout the pandemic era. And my word, was this something else. A huge reason for this was the focus on Brody Lee, and let's never forget his memory and make sure we keep him alive in all of our minds. But also, it told a really good message. This whole pandemic is probably going to be one of the most defining things of all of our lives, and it's been rubbish, and it sucked, but wrestling and AEW and Dynamite has been there to distract us, and I, for one, have really appreciated it. I mean, just knowing that we can keep having our stupid arguments and all the madness that wrestling does bring, be it AEW, WWE, Impact, New Japan, or whatever, sometimes, and on a rare occasion, it was almost like nothing crazy outside of our walls was actually happening. And that was flipping great. And that goes for all you guys as well, because you kept coming in the comments and talking to me on social media. And for all of this and that and this, that, and maybe, you gotta give it a golden up. I mean, even I'm about to step back into the rest of the ring for the first time since March 2020. So it really does feel like the end of a crazy, crazy time. So yes, it is exciting, but what we should do is we should come out the other side ensuring that we're a little bit nicer, we're a little bit happier, and we're a little bit kinder to everybody else. Yours sincerely, Simon Miller. This AEW Dynamite rocked, which of course means it's getting it up. Now don't forget to leave a comment below and let us know what you thought about last night's AEW Dynamite. Like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Head on over to WhatCulture.com where you can read articles like this and a separate AEW Ups and Downs article. Maybe you agree with them more than you agree with me. This is fine. Make sure you come say hello on social media, and look, you're already on YouTube. give another video a click. My name is Simon for WhatCulture. Thank you very much for joining me as always, and I will see you on the next one.